Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for some technical difficulties. Talking about what is actually being found dropping from the sky.
So in New Mexico, when Clifford was collecting all the data, he and I and his wife and other friends would go out for breakfast. Clifford and I would end up breakfast together talking on about this. This was before I wrote the character's books. I had this background. He then collected the blood and my spit and analyzed it. And I was able to look under a microscope and see this biological, this genetically engineered biological creature eating the iron out of my red blood cells. And he did a small sampling then. We were looking for people all the time. And all of them had the same thing going on, with some people's red blood cells not even.
Welcome, Eagles, to another episode of Trad Cat Night Radio. I am Eric Gajewski, founder and owner of Trad Cat Night, the most viewed and followed traditional Catholic website worldwide, ranked number 1 by Alexa. Ladies and gentlemen, I have for you today another special guest, Mr. Rob Kirby from KirbyAnalytics.com. Today we're going to be talking a little economics, a little economic endgame, if you will. Get your house in order. That's both what I have been preaching and Rob as well. But before we get to Rob, just some quick background on him. Educated at York University in Toronto, economics. After university, Rob worked for 15 years in the institutional brokerage, involved in foreign exchange, global bond and money markets, and interest rate derivatives. After 15 years in institutional brokerage, Rob worked 4 years as a retail investment advisor before he even began writing about the markets. And so some quick numbers for you today. Dow is at 18,463. NASDAQ is at 5253, and the S&P is at 2179. Rob, thank you for taking time out and coming on to the show today. You know, many have been expecting this complete collapse seriously now for, I don't know, what it's been, a year or two. However, you will argue that essentially we're already in it. If you can kind of give us a backdrop, lay a foundation for this talk, and we'll kind of just take it from there as to why we should say that.
Well, a pleasure to be with you, Eric. My thoughts on what we're witnessing and what we're experiencing has been a slow motion train wreck. It's been going on now for a number of years, and the full scope of what's occurring has been kept from let's just see lay people from recognizing it, because we've had an exceptional amount of interference, or something that I refer to as rigging of markets, to try and make people feel happy. It's like feeding people Kool-Aid to make them not recognize the true state of the economy around them and living standards around them. And this is all evidenced by things that we if you want to dig and get your hands a little bit dirty, you can dig in and see how this is perpetrated. As a couple of, for instances, Eric, we have government tell us that there's low or no inflation. We have the government tell us that the unemployment rate is sub 5%. Just last week, we had Fed Vice Chair Stanley Fischer say that the unemployment picture basically was as good as it could get and has never looked better. But then we can go to alternative sources, very reputable people, like on the inflation front and on the unemployment front. If we look at the work of John Williams, a very noted accountant, economic thinker, who maintains a site called shadowstats.com, and Mr. Williams reverse engineers the unemployment data and the inflation data, and all he really does is he measures both of those indexes the way they were measured in 1980. And lo and behold, if you actually measure the inflation data the same way it was measured in 1980, you have an inflation rate of around 10%, and you have an unemployment rate of roughly 24%. And let's just say that an inflation rate of 10 and an unemployment rate of 24 in 1980 would have been viewed as depressionary and would have meant that the economy is in grave condition. The reality is the economy is in grave condition. There has been no recovery from 2007-8. And we have, this is also further exemplified or manifested in the percentage of the labor force that is not working. We have an all-time record low labor participation rate, and we have, I think it's last number I heard was, I think it's 102 million Americans that I believe were on food stamps. So, you know, it's this headline data set that we get bleated by the mainstream media on CNBC, CNN in an endless loop, telling us that things are good, and despite how good things are, we have interest rates at basically emergency all-time lows, and we have persistent and consistent threats that interest rates are going to be raised imminently, and yet they never seem to go up. So anyway, all I wanted to do there was just point out the difference between what we're told and what reality truly is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you across the board. Mainstream media certainly plays a big part in this whole mess that we call the New World Order. Markets rigged. The economy across the board seems to be just phony, propped up Ponzi scheme. And they seem to be going criminal, as some of my other economists have mentioned. Can you give us an example how, you know, we see what's going on with Hillary Clinton, how she thinks she's above the law. You know, how does this apply to the economic side? I know you've mentioned in some of your talks that this principle essentially applies to big banks. If you can maybe give us an example of how this crony capitalism rigged system works.
Well, the crony capitalists, as a collective group, I refer to them as the globalists. And the globalists are spearheaded basically by the banks, with the banks representing, I'm going to just say, as a large group, it's basically old European aristocracy or old European money for the most part. Okay. And these would include the Dutch royal family, the Rothschilds, and on this side of the pond, it's the Rockefellers and their acolytes, and the modern day people who are the front men for these type of movements, certainly in a North American context, would include people like Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Maurice Strong, George Soros. These are people who have written white papers over the last 40, 50, 60 years. They have outlined their globalist platform, which is eugenics based. It shows utter contempt for humanity. They view us, the little people, as a scourge on the planet that needs to be removed. Yeah. They believe that the global population or the sustainable population on our planet is something in the magnitude of 400 to 500 million instead of the current 7 billion. So if you want to extrapolate that out, they're basically saying they want to get rid of 6.5 billion of us. And they loosely refer to us, I think in the words of Henry Kissinger, as useless eaters. So these people have demonstrated their contempt for humanity by the promotion of such things as fluoride in our water, the advent and the spread of GMO foods. And for those of you who don't understand what the implications are of GMO foods, To give you a little, for instance, there have been tests done on Monsanto's GMO corn. I know if they feed it to give a rat an exclusive diet of Monsanto GMO corn for 90 days, it's completely sterile. Yeah. You know, these are things that just aren't good for us, which is why Monsanto Foods and Monsanto seed has been outlawed in places like Russia. And just to speak a little bit more about Monsanto, it is said, and I do believe this because I've read it from a few different sources, at Monsanto headquarters, the scientists who actually work on this stuff won't even have it in their own cafeteria. So if it isn't good enough for the people who create it, why is it good enough for us?
Absolutely. Now, speaking about death, what about death of the dollar and this trend and move towards a more cashless society? I know we're seeing it in some European countries. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but Sweden, I think, is kind of moving in that direction. Going into these times ahead, we don't want to be fear mongers. We all have to, in my opinion, get over the fear of not being able to get through this post-collapse world. But should there be concern about this, this one world socialist microchip system? How far along are we in the process in terms of here domestically, but then abroad over in Europe?
Well, let's just put it this way. The very design of irredeemable fiat currency that's backed by nothing, there have been plenty examples of it being used throughout the world by different countries at different times. And the one thing about irredeemable fiat currency is that it has a shelf life, and every example of it that's ever been perpetrated on mankind has ended in its complete and utter failure, where ultimately it reaches its true intrinsic value, which is zero. So what I'm saying is fiat money has, or fiat as some people like to call it, I just prefer to call it fiat money. It has a life cycle, just like a butterfly starts as a caterpillar, and then it goes into a cocoon, and then a butterfly comes out, and it has a lifespan, and then it dies. Fiat money has a very identifiable life cycle. Anybody who wants to get a bigger understanding about the natural life cycle of fiat money, I advise you to Google the name Chris Martenson and Crash Course. On Chris Martenson's site, he has done a nice little video montage called the Crash Course, which very, very neatly, inside of 30 minutes, will give you the literally a nice little YouTube presentation that shows you exactly what the life cycle of fiat money is. And make no mistake, fiat money by its very design is designed to fail or to wind up. And the long and short of it is fiat money, after it's created, needs to have a growth arc which is upward to the right. And in the beginning or in the early years of a fiat money regime, that upward slope is very, very, very gradual. But there comes a point, no matter what the rate of interest is that is assigned, there comes a point where that upward growth inflects and goes vertical. And we are now on the portion of the curve where we've inflected and it grows vertically, which means in the real world that fiat money has to be created at an ever-increasing pace for the system not to implode upon itself. And when you create something at an infinite rate, its value goes to zero. And typically the way that manifests itself in the real world is a hyperinflation, because you're producing infinite amounts of money in a closed loop system that has finite resources. And do remember, folks, we live on a little blue planet that's making its way through the universe, and we are finite in terms of our resources. The amount of resource we have on this planet is finite. Yeah. And when you create infinite amounts of money, which represents demand, there's only one thing that can happen to the marginal value of the last unit of money created, and that is that it goes down, and it ultimately goes to zero.
Yeah. Now there's many. I know we'll have a lot of followers out there who will want to ask specifically about this stock market crash. First and foremost, I'd like to, ask you. It's not a matter of. I think we all can agree. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. I've had some come on and say, yeah, it'll happen before the elections. Yeah, it'll happen by 2016 year's end. I had V, the Guerrilla Economist, say sometime in 2017. But when it actually happens, Rob, are we talking? Will it happen over an extended week? Will it just be days? Will it be one day? I mean, how do you think this is going to play out?
Well, if we want to put any credence at all into what media darling James Rickards is saying, he's actually recently come out with a neat little video piece where it's titled that basically the reset is going to happen on September 30th, Friday, later this month at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, I mean, far be it from me to place the day and the time on this. I truly believe, from a fundamentalist point of view, that we are living on borrowed time now, and that we could see some severe dislocations arise in our financial markets or capital markets literally any day now, because I believe we're seeing the entrails of it already, and it's only being obscured from plain view by increasingly grotesque interventions by central banks. And if people want to get wrap their head around how big the interventions are, it's like the central bank in Japan, I think, owns 35% of all outstanding Japanese government debt right now. You look at the size, if you want to Google Swiss National Bank and their equity holdings, the Swiss National Bank has been buying stocks on global marketplaces. I mean, the central banks are involved in all facets of all markets, and they have arguably no place to be involved in any of these markets, because what they're doing is they're picking who the winners are going to be, and this is just a grotesque and you know what? It's not sustainable. That's the takeaway. It's not sustainable. It's not something you can do forever and maintain a semblance of order. So that's the track we're on. And how do we get off that track, and when does it all blow apart? Well, the premise behind Rickards and his thinking that it's the end of September is that time and date happens to be when the Chinese currency is officially placed into the SDR basket of currencies that are held at the IMF, and that and the thinking goes with Rickards' line of thought that when the Chinese currency moves into that basket, there will be globally a much diminished need or want for U.S. dollars, because the new Chinese portion of the SDR basket will be displacing a whole lot of dollars and putting a whole lot of dollars onto the market. And to his line of thinking, the dollar could crash from that point onward.
Interesting.
I mean, could that be the case? I wouldn't necessarily rule it out, because in my view, we could also maybe have a crash, because the reality in financial markets, if you know how the likes of J.P. Morgan, or a Citibank or a Morgan Stanley or a Goldman Sachs, if you know how they really operate, they tend to front run things that they know are going to happen anyway. So from that standpoint, my thinking would be, well, why wouldn't the crash start earlier?
Yeah.
When the investment banks do what they do, comes to them naturally, and they front run what they know is a known event coming down the pipe. But let's just say the chorus of very notable economic minds who are predicting imminent dislocations in our capital markets, include not just James Rickards. We've got the likes of Stockton. We've got the likes of Chris Martenson. Like these are very, very, very intelligent, reasoned people who have studied markets and have been on top of these markets for many, many, many years. And these people are all starting to sing off the same hymn sheet, and that tends to give me. I agree. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. The other thing I do believe is that the global leadership community, as exemplified by last weekend's meeting in China of the G20, we had some very, very curious and odd events that occurred with respect to the treatment of the sitting U.S. President, Mr. Barack Obama. And the first one was when he arrived. There was no staircase on hand to wheel up to Air Force One to have him exit via the customary front door of Air Force One onto a red carpet. Instead, President Obama was forced to disembark from Air Force One, as the British tabloid The Guardian said, from the ass of Air Force One, to no red carpet and a door that just sort of dropped down out of the tail end of the jet. And that, there's no precedent for this ever having occurred to a sitting U.S. president. And then it was the leader of the it was either what was it, Indonesia, I believe, or the Philippines. It was the newly minted Philippine leader who literally cussed Obama out.
Yeah, son of a whore, he called it.
Yeah. Well, my view, you see, I actually believe that these events, I don't believe any of these events occur because of snafus and due to mistake. It's my belief that the global leadership group, I think, are very aware that there is a global reset coming imminently. And I honestly believe that they feel that America is at the epicenter of this problem that they are going to have to deal with. As in, every country in the world is going to have to deal with the fallout of this reset that's coming, that is imminent. And my feeling is that these leaders, the angst that is built up in them and the resentment that has built up in them, because we've been living with the American administration from the financial side, proffering up lie after lie after lie after misdirection about the state of global economic affairs. And I think it's really starting to come home to roost with these world leaders, that they are ultimately going to be the ones facing their populations when this explodes and blows up in everybody's collective face.
Yeah.
And I think that they're pissed, and I think that they're angry, and I think that they're venting, and I think that they're aiming their vent and their anger at basically the leadership group who's the prime architect of it. See, I don't think it's a coincidence that American leadership is being treated in such a foul and dirty manner by those in the know, because I do believe that they are in the know.
Yeah.
And I do believe that this is coming, and I do believe it's coming very, very soon. And they're aware, and they're acting. They can't help themselves. They are legitimately upset.
to follow up on that point too, Rob, it seems to me, in conjunction with that, the whole economic side, the buildup of U.S. and NATO forces there in the Ukraine, I mean, that's really setting off Putin and Russia, and I don't know how much longer they're going to hold out before something serious happens, not only in that area, but over here domestically. But my next question for you is in regards to just some, practical advice. I know you can't give professional legal counsel, things like that. We know you're an advocate of precious metals, obviously gold and silver. What should listeners be doing? I mean, should we be slowly liquidating stock? I mean, I think it was Andy Hoffman who said you shouldn't even be stocks at all at this point. What about IRA accounts, savings accounts? It seems to me in the post-collapse world, you'll go to the ATM and not be able to get any money out. There's a lot of concern out there for just your everyday person out there who's obviously a layman when it comes to economics. And then a second point to that is, I know you're also an advocate for, being prepared. And I always remind people that, in the Old Testament, Noah and Joseph were preppers. I mean, they prepared for the quote-unquote crises of their time. So maybe you can handle those two areas.
Yeah, well, my view on ownership of precious metal is that if you can't touch it or go and touch it, you don't own it. So I'm not an advocate of owning proxies for precious metal or paper precious metal, as in stock exchange traded instruments that are somehow linked to or are derivatives of precious metal. My preferred method, I would say, is probably to own coins or bars of both gold and silver. And with regards to additional ways you can get prepared, I think you might want to have some storable food and the means to create or produce some potable water. I think these are just wise things to have on hand in case we see a complete and utter breakdown in our financial edifice, where supply chains let's just say this: all commerce and all trade that we see today basically operates on credit. And if we see dislocations in our financial system, it's very likely that we, for a period of time, could see interruptions in severe dislocations or interruptions in the credit markets, which could then produce problems in food getting to stores for a period of time. And in saying this, I'm not in any way saying that commerce will stop. Commerce will always continue, but it's just that commerce might continue without fiat money being involved. And we might be, and in my view, very likely will be forced back onto some sort of a barter system.
Yeah, I agree.
When the system breaks down, where people are only going to give you the fruits of their labor or their valuable things for other things of acceptable intrinsic value. And precious metals have stood the test of time. People know what an ounce of silver is. People know what an ounce of gold is, and there are historic ties of what a good day's work is worth in metal, both gold and silver, and what a good week's wages are in both gold and silver. And when you have discredited fiat money in the system that's been produced in infinite amounts, the reason the system will break down is because people will no longer trust the value of what that currency unit, that fiat currency unit, is going to be worth the next day. And when that becomes unacceptable in trade, that's when you're back to barter.
Yeah. Now, are you finding still a lot of resistance? I'm sure you get this a lot, as I do. You're a tinfoil hat wearing kind of guy, conspiratorial. People just can't process how the United States, as large as we are, as quote unquote powerful as we are, you can't see us turning into another Venezuela or Greece yet. There's a lot of indication that we're moving in that direction. And it seems like very soon, I think both you and I can agree that the rug is just going to be pulled out from underneath our feet, and we're going to be in a whole different world. And a lot of people are not going to know how to react properly. So I know you've been an advocate for, prudent, proper, against gun control. Let's put it to you that way. But, what do you say to this, to these troll types? I mean, it seems to me all the indicators are there, yet we're still getting a lot of this resistance.
Well, listen, anybody who thinks that my claims are outrageous, all I would ask you to do is listen to FBI Director Comey. Do it, Google Comey and his press conference about Hillary Clinton and his decision not to indict, and read and just listen to over and over again the identifiable felonies that Mr. Comey outlines that Hillary Clinton has committed in his own words, because he goes through a laundry list. His press conference read like something that was going to end in an indictment, and at the end of his laundry list of indictable offenses that Hillary Clinton has committed, he then concludes with, in spite of all this, there's no way anybody would ever indict her. It's beyond laughable. It's that in itself lowered the global view of America. I don't know how many notches.
Yeah, I think
it's showing America to be a country that is not a country or a land of law. And it's frankly, it's turning America into the laughingstock of the world.
Yeah, it could be setting us up a revolution too here.
Well, it's really in all honesty, it's quite unthinkable that we can actually be witnessing what's going on here with the revelations that are coming out regarding Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and the treasonous acts that have been committed. And listen, I'm not a Republican lover at all. I'm anti-globalist, and I don't mind saying it. I happen to favor Trump over Clinton only because Trump is anti-globalist, and he says he would rip up these trade deals, which really are treaties, which really are about usurping the sovereignty out of any country that signs them, because he's an anti-globalist. He's a nationalist, and I too am a nationalist. I'm a Canadian nationalist. I don't want Canada signed on to these global deals that usurp sovereignty from Canada. I don't want decisions that affect Canadians being made in foreign countries by people who do not represent Canadians. I don't think it's healthy that Americans should cede decision-making power to foreign lands where decisions about what goes on in America are made by people who don't know anything about America or Americans. So from that standpoint, I share that sentiment, and that's without making or passing any judgment on what kind of a president Donald Trump may or may not be. But I'm definitely anti-globalist. Yeah. And all I can say is if the globalist agenda is allowed to carry forward, God help humanity.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and to follow up on my point previous, it's not just Rob Kirby saying these things. It's not just me. It's not just, Gerald Celente. It was, I believe, the head of the Fed saying, get prepared. It was Russia recently telling its people to prepare. It was Finland, Germany, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people are saying this. We need to wake up to this reality. Again, I'm here with Rob Kirby from KirbyAnalytics.com. I want Rob to finish up here in this last little brief piece here. Tell everyone, or talk to everyone about getting their house in order. I know this extends even above and beyond the economic level, but I want to give you this last few minutes to kind of close us out with this particular area.
Well, I mean, you can think of preparedness in terms of getting your financial house in order. you can think of preparedness in terms of, you know, storable food or provisions for your family and those close to you. But I also think you can think of preparedness in terms of getting your spiritual house in order and getting right with what is sure to come. And I don't know what else to say other than that. Have an open mind. Get to know your neighbors.
Yes.
Get to know your neighbors and get to know and associate with people of like mind, because when the going gets real tough, I just don't believe anybody's going to have enough friends.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to say that, Rob. I was trying to lead you into that. Communities. Yeah, start getting to know your neighbors. Start talking to them now. The more and more you can educate others and cause awareness to these things, the more people will be somewhat on the same page, leading into what I call the great storm. Rob, it's a pleasure having you on. Thank you for the wonderful insights today. Again, get to kirbyanalytics.com, a plethora of economic resources here. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but you do have to sign up to become a member. But the information you're going to get here is bar none. You know, you need to have this information headed into the times that we're heading into. So until next time, my good friends, stay safe and God bless.